God doesn't need evil to make good things happen to
No.
us. It's not required. It's not required. Now, I do think, though, looking at the spiritual tradition, that sometimes God does allow us to experience suffering
Yes.
for important reasons. Like, for example, take the avoidance of a sin. Like people who struggle with lust, to grab one of the seven big ones, right? And they often become very frustrated with it. And St. Thomas Aquinas, along with other spiritual authors, if memory serves me, we're talking about St. Bernard, St. Augustine of Hippo, maybe even John Chrysostom here on this point, but they all say that God allows us to fall into a particular sin to spare us from a larger, from a greater, a more grievous sin. So it could be the case that God allows us to struggle with lust for a very long time, for example, to preserve us from pride, which is far worse.
Yes.
So to preserve us in that way from something that would be more deadly, a lesser evil. Again, to use this important language, and this language is very important, which is why we said at the top of the episode, God permits or God allows, doesn't directly will. So God permits or allows this. And from there, we can argue that, okay, God is using this, God is allowing this to be, that we might find spiritual growth from it, right? We could be refined in it. So I really appreciated your point in emphasizing that God doesn't need evil to draw good. It's not necessary, but that God can. And I like this point from the tradition about growth, about experiencing growth in the spiritual life by moving from lesser evils and being preserved from greater ones.
And I think to understand that appropriately is not that God doesn't need evil to make good, but he actually can and does make good from evil, right? The evil of the crucifixion. But like there was tremendous good that came about that he drew from that. But to your point as well, which is, I think, extremely important, is to see how God maybe treats some of these sins. Like you said, he permits or allows somebody to struggle with a particular sin to maybe help them learn a lesson earlier, learn a lesson with a lesser sin instead of having to deal with a more severe sin. Now, what does that reveal to us about God if he's allowing this to happen in a certain kind of pedagogical way in the spiritual life to allow for spiritual growth? Well, he's treating us like his children. That's how a father treats.
Father Bonaventure, if you had the choice between holding a toad and subscribing to a YouTube channel, what would you choose?
Subscribe to a toad holding a YouTube channel.
Oh my gosh. Please subscribe to a toad holding a YouTube channel, especially if it's ours. Cheers.